Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special evening episode of the Morning Prowl. How are you tonight, Bridget?
I am doing great. I kind of love the morning prowl at night. I feel like I have fewer bags, more alive. So I'm excited for this. And I think we couldn't have brought a better episode to folks in the evening.
Hold on one second. I'm so sorry, Bridget. Hold on. So there's this thing I do, guys, where I forget that I have our YouTube channel up in another tab and I just start hearing an echo. So sorry. Bridget, I heard everything you said twice, but I will say I still have my trusty coffee, even though it's the evening prowl. So I think that probably means I'm a psycho officially. But without further ado, I want to bring our special guest in, guys. I am so honored that Kelli Masters has chose to sit down and hang out with me and Bridget for a little bit tonight. I know she's insanely busy, but basically, this woman, she is an agent in the NFL, but she's so much more. She's also a lawyer. She's the founder and CEO of Kelli Masters Management. And so, without further ado, let us bring her in so that you guys can meet her. Hi, Kelli.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are y'all?
We're
Doing good.
good. We're so excited to have you. This is going to be a really good conversation.
I'm so
Yeah.
excited to talk to you guys. And I'm more of a night owl than a morning person, so I'm so thankful that we're doing this at night. I would be so like, yeah, not my best if it was in the morning. So I don't know how y'all do it.
It's a lot of coffee and thoughts and prayers.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah, and hairspray and makeup, like
Dry
lots of that.
shampoo. Dry
Yeah.
shampoo.
Fresh
Yeah,
and
yeah.
caffeine.
So I know you had a busy day, and I kind of want to get to that because I think it'll be really interesting for you to share with everybody a little bit about what your days do look like.
Yeah.
But first, for people just getting to know you, can you give us just a little bit of a background about how you
Yeah.
got to working with players in the NFL?
Yes, and for everyone watching, I've already apologized to Bridget and Whitney. I'm in a hotel room. Hotel rooms have horrible lighting. I don't have like a ring light or anything cool lighting wise, but I am doing the whole orange vibe for the Bengals. So
Who day?
unintentionally, it's a who day unintentional sort of filter going on. So
We'll
Love
take
it.
it.
yeah, so I have been an agent for 17, almost 18 years in the NFL. I've been an attorney since 2000. So over 22 years. That sounds terrible.
That sounds weird.
Sounds so weird. How have we been alive that long? So I got I'm an Oklahoma girl. I got my undergrad degree in journalism from the University of Oklahoma. I got my law degree from the University of Oklahoma. While I was in law school, I have such a crazy journey to getting to where I am. I was well in undergrad. I was an athlete, but not a traditional athlete. I was a baton twirler, competitive baton twirler. So I was the
Yes.
twirler for the University of Oklahoma, which is still a big deal at some schools. Some people are like, "You did what?" like,
Excuse me, you were a world champion. I saw that. So
That featured heavily in Witten and our prep for this show. So there may be a question about that later
I
on.
totally should have brought my batons, like not the flaming
yes,
ones, but next
go
time
grab a curtain rod. Go grab a curtain rod.
I'll twirl anything. Like even when I go golf, like which I don't golf, but if I'm on the golf, like the driving range or Top Golf, I'm totally twirling the golf clubs. So yeah, that never leaves. So I was baton twirler, competitive baton twirler from age like 5 all the way through college, twirled for OU, and then used it as a talent to compete in the Miss Oklahoma pageant, won that, went to Miss America. And for anyone who gives me grief about being a pageant girl, I did not aspire to be a pageant girl. I was trying to win money for school. And so I paid for law school with my Miss America scholarship, which is so crazy, but great experience, met a lot of amazing people. It opened such great doors. And I swear this is true. I am naturally very maybe I'm what you call like the extroverted introvert. Like I can go out and be what I need to be, but I still need to like get away from everybody and like I just get drained really easily. So anyway,
Yeah.
so being a natural introvert, being on stage, being Miss Oklahoma, traveling around the state, speaking at every school and every Kiwanis club in every county in Oklahoma was such a great experience and such great. It wasn't just great connections. It was great for discovering who I was and how to communicate and how to connect with people and really understanding what people genuinely care about and what they value. And so it was a fantastic experience right in the middle of law school. I finished law school, but in that process, while I was in law school, I really started wrestling with the idea of having a purpose in life. And I had been so driven, like most of us are, especially that work in sports. You have to be exceptionally dedicated and driven and intentional and do whatever it takes to win. And I'd always been that way, but I kind of reached that point where I was like, I just want to know that I'm serving a purpose. I want to know that I was put on this earth for a reason and I'm doing that. I'm impacting the lives I'm supposed to impact. I'm doing the work I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm living with intention and purpose. And so because of that kind of soul searching time in law school, when I graduated, I knew I was going to start in litigation. I just knew that was a starting point. My father had been an attorney and also a radio play-by-play for high school football. So that's
Oh.
tie-in.
Mhm.
And he influenced me very, very heavily. He passed away from lung cancer the month before I took the bar exam. So it was almost like he passed the baton to me, and I took the mantle and became an attorney. But that football side of me was always there. I never thought I would work in it, but it was just always a part of me. And then, so I started my law practice, but I wanted to do something that was purposeful, not just litigation. I wanted to learn how to be a strong advocate, but I also had such a sense of fighting to make a difference, fighting against injustice, fighting for the little guy. And so that led me to not only be a litigator, but also work with nonprofit organizations. And in the middle of pursuing excellence as a litigator and become a partner in my firm, I was contacted by a former NFL player and his family about their foundation, their nonprofit organization. And they were having trouble with the IRS and some other issues, and they needed to hire a lawyer to fight for them. And that was my introduction to working with athletes. And so it opened this whole world to me that I thought, oh my gosh, I can combine my love of advocacy, my love of being like a fighter for truth and justice in the American way, and also doing good and living with purpose and football, like all the things that I could combine it all in one career. And so that's what I did. And I got certified to be an NFL agent in 2005. I started my own company. I still have my own company, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's been it's been a crazy, difficult journey, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
It just seems so funny to me how life can sometimes just lead you where you're supposed to go as long as you don't fight it and you kind of listen to it. You came in with knowing that you were looking to find your purpose. You weren't just like wandering in the dark. And so I think you were able to recognize those, openings, and experiences. And I think it's funny if you hadn't done like the Miss America thing, not only did it pay for college, but the exposure of like flexing or exercising that muscle of being forced to be a little extroverted sometimes and all of that. Like,
outside the comfort zone. And there's so many things that I learned from pageants and baton twirling that I now implement as in the sports world. I don't get that, but it's all, you're right. It all led me to the path that I was supposed to be on.
So, Kelli, we have to know then, what is harder, the toughest baton stunt you've ever done, or the toughest contract you've ever negotiated, or the toughest case you've ever argued? Like, how would you rank those?
That's such a great question. First of all, 100% the hardest thing was the baton twirling. Like, I will never do anything harder than learning new skills as a baton twirler. It's because you do it. And I remember even being like 6 or 7 or 8 years old and standing in my living room working on the same move. I remember it was like an elbow roll where you just roll the baton over your elbow. And my goal was to get it right 100 times a day. And it took me months and months. So I learned like discipline and perseverance at a young age. When I was fortunate, my parents pushed me, but I'm glad they did. And my mom was like, "You're going to do this. You're not going to give up. I'm not going to let you quit." And I just learned to keep things until it got easier. And so I think that instilled in me that fight, that even if it's hard and even if it takes years to accomplish something or to get good at something, then you don't give up. You keep doing it, and you don't let disappointment drag you down. And so physically and just all the life lessons, twirling, 100%. I love contracts. I nerd out on contracts, so that's my favorite thing to do. I love the study of it. I love the negotiation process. I love just the fight, the struggle. It's funny because it's weird. I'm not a conflict. I hate conflict. I would never find a solution and be a peacemaker. But I feel like that makes me an even better advocate as a contract negotiator, because I'm like, okay, we're going to find a way to get this done, and it doesn't matter how much adversity we're facing. We're going to figure this out. We're going to find a way to get this done where it's going to be great for my client, and it's also not going to burn bridges in the process. And so even though I hate conflict, I love advocacy, and I love looking at it that way. And so contract for me, it's hard. It's really, really hard. I love it. It's easier than normal. So yeah, twirling was the hardest thing. I will say, from a legal standpoint, probably two of the most intimidating things, and we talked about it before we got on. I was a litigator for a long time. I was a partner in my firm. I had a client in the energy sector. It's a totally boring case. It's employment law. I don't want to get into it because no one would keep watching. It's boring content, but so exciting for me because I was being an advocate. And I had two cases for them. One, when we took all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and won. And so personally having a client and taking a case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court is almost impossible. Like 1% of all cases that are appealed go to the Supreme Court. So I didn't get to argue. They ruled on the briefs. Dang it. So I didn't get to I got admitted, but didn't get to actually go into DC and fight. Would have been amazing, but winning was great. But I did get to argue a case at the 10th Circuit in Denver, and it was in front of Neil Gorsuch right before he went on the U.S. Supreme Court. And talk about intimidating. It literally, I hadn't felt those butterflies and that, oh my gosh, so much is riding on this, and this is so much pressure. I can't even breathe. I hadn't felt that since my baton twirling days. And so I was like, this is my Super Bowl. I the day before did a walkthrough, just like I did. I walked through the whole, walking up to the podium and the pageantry and the court. Yeah. And I watched, the arguments the day before, and just to get a feel for it. And when I went in, I was like, it is game time. Game face on. I'm going to do this. And that was hard, but it was such a fun, I wanted to run out like Rocky, at the end, when I won. I did this. So,
yes.
Yeah, those are the highlight moments, but yeah.
I think it's funny, just because how transferable that mindset is for relating to the players that you talk to and that you represent, because you have to have the mind of a champion or an athlete to be so good at something. You're a world champion. It's not like you just won a local contest. You were a world champion multiple times. And so that there's a mindset there of practice and determination and that rigor and enjoying the process. And that is really special to or unique to an athlete. And you have that. And then you also, like you said, when you have those big cases, you go into that, you're game planning. It's your Super Bowl, like you said. So you have a lot of transferable ways, to relate to the players.
It's funny. And I grew up a football fan, which I tell people all the time, because I hear for almost 2 decades now, I've heard from people who want to be an agent because they love football. I'm like, well, you can't just be a fan and be a great agent. That's just loving football or loving player, like loving stats, loving fantasy football does not make you a great agent. That's just not it. I was a football fan, but as an athlete who understands the discipline and the sacrifices and the years and years of unseen efforts that go into competing at the highest level, and that level of discipline is if you've experienced it, you get it. And I even from the mental side, like I remember preparing for years and years and years and competing at my first World Championships. It was in Amsterdam, Holland. I think I was 15 years old, and I remember being back in the warm-up gym, getting ready to take the floor, and physically I had prepared, I was ready, and mentally I was like, I don't want to be here. I just want to go hide under a rock. Like, this is terrible. Like, I was mentally really struggling and learning how to, and how to prepare yourself mentally and physically to be tenacious and to compete under that kind of pressure. And granted, I didn't have millions of people watching me, but like I felt like the whole world was on my shoulders in that moment. And so I get it. So when I'm working with athletes, it's not just managing their careers, which I love to do, but it's also about understanding what they're going through as athletes, who they are, what it takes to compete and prepare physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, day in, day out for years to get to the level that they're at. It's a unique, I feel like it's a unique perspective and bond that I get to share with my athletes. So
yeah. That's tremendous. Yeah, it's like all those years of like you referred to it as unseen effort, which I think is a beautiful way to put it. But you do all of that, and then you have like a moment often to showcase it.
Yeah,
and that's it. You don't get that moment back, and so it is intense pressure, especially for young men trying to make it into the NFL. A lot of them get really 1 or 2 chances to be seen, and that's it.
Yeah. And it's, I've been fortunate to represent all types of players from all different backgrounds and walks of life, and players who have been first rounders, players who have been undrafted free agents. And so, and every single one of them deserves an opportunity. They all worked hard to get there. They have to be different levels of talent, different skill sets, different preparation processes, but they all deserve that opportunity. And I absolutely love working with the undrafted guys who come in and know that every single moment of the day, they can't take anything for granted. They're being watched, everything on the field, off the field, from the moment they step, into the facility until they leave every day. They're being watched, and everything matters. And sometimes they may only get a handful of snaps in a practice to prove themselves, and they have to be ready to do that. I hadn't really thought about it much until this moment that we're talking about it. But I remember going into my competitions and preparing for, sometimes a full year to do a 2-minute presentation, like 2-minute routine. And I'd worked on that routine for, 2 solid years, or, a year or 2, whatever it is, years to get to a moment where you have just, minutes, a couple of minutes or seconds to prove yourself. And there's so much pressure in that. And especially for NFL players, this is the pressure. I don't know if anyone truly realizes or comprehends the pressure that is on an NFL player. It's not just for him, his family, his community, his university, his fans, people who have him on their fantasy football team. Like, that young man is under tremendous, tremendous pressure and expectation, not just to perform well, but to provide for his family, to impact his community, to leave a legacy for his school, to leave a legacy for his name. And so the pressure is intense every single moment of their lives. And it's really hard too. I a lot of times the guys at the top of the roster get the attention, the guys that are making the Pro Bowl and the stats, and the guys who are on TV, every weekend getting accolades. You hear about them. You don't necessarily hear about the guys that are busting their butts on teams to stay on
Yeah.
our roster, and working so hard, and know that they could be replaced at any moment.
Yeah.
There's constant rotation on practice squad and at the bottom of the roster, and at any moment they've watched it. They've looked around and they've seen the guy in the locker next to them have a job one day and be on the street the next. And so
Yeah.
the pressure that they're under is absolutely intense. So let me just preface everything we just talked about. As far as me being able to relate, I've never experienced that level of pressure. Like baton twirling,
Right.
not on the level of the NFL, but I have such appreciation just from my own personal experience. I have such an appreciation at some level of what they're having to go through, just the physical and mental aspect of making it to the NFL, not to mention all the other pressures that come from being in, quite frankly, one of the most popular sports in history in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It probably forces them to grow up a lot faster than is normal
very true.
when you have that much responsibility.
Oh my gosh, yes. And more so than anyone, I think, truly appreciates.
Well, Kelli, you mentioned that your background brings with it this advocacy lens and fighting for truth, justice, goodness. And I had the privilege to talk to Kevin Booth, who's a former player. He now works for the league and he's in player relations. And one of the things he shared with me, and I had never even thought about this, that part of what the league tries to do, right, is equip these young men with skills. And I was telling Whit this when we were prepping earlier this week, but I said, one of the things he asked me, so Kelli, I know you said something about age. I'll share my age. He asked me, how old are you? And I was like, I'm 36. And he's like, where are you in your career? And I was like, well, it's been going well, really taken off the last couple of years. I imagine there's going to be a great trajectory moving forward. He's like, a lot of the guys who are your age, who are playing in the league, their careers are either done or about to be done. Can you imagine being your age and being like, what's next? And so I'm wondering, and like we all as fans, right, we get on our social media and we hammer hard on these players, on these teams who have just kind of unknowable amount of pressure if you're not in it. And so what in your role might we be surprised about, or what do you see in this NFL or even any kind of athletic system? How are folks advocating for these players outside of just ensuring that they're getting what they deserve in terms of compensation and in terms of media? But what else does that look like from an advocacy standpoint?
Oh my gosh, there's so we could talk for hours.
Okay.
There's so much to unpack about this. One of the things, several thoughts that come to mind. One of the things that drew me to working, that convinced me to start working with athletes in the first place, is knowing, as a longtime football fan, I remember just growing up in Oklahoma and seeing players that were stars in college and went on to become stars in the NFL and make millions of dollars, and yet end up back in Oklahoma, I would say like broke sometimes, but certainly broken. And what I realized is football is it never, and really any sport, typically does not, for any one player, does not end well. It's usually, with notable exceptions, a lot of times players' careers end because they become replaceable, or they get injured, or they're just too old, or they're not cutting it anymore, or they can be replaced with younger talent, or just nobody. They're still talented enough to play in the NFL, but there's just not a fit or a situation that's right for them. And we've seen players just kind of, even players who have been magical and have had millions of fans and have been to the Pro Bowl multiple times, you see them kind of at the end sort of floating around with going, what's the next opportunity? Is there a next opportunity? Is it time to move on? Is it time to do something else? And even for players where they have these great careers, 5 to 10 year careers, the end, there's always kind of this time period, if it's a moment or if it's years, where they're a little bit lost, going, okay, who am I? And it's honestly, it's because and this is true for all of us, but it's heightened with professional athletes, is we as human beings tend to wrap our identity in what we do. And that becomes, what people think of us, and what we, hold on. Did I lose you? Okay.
No.
Sorry. Something weird. So our identity becomes so tied to what we do, our job, our title, our, influence, our followers, whatever, that if that suddenly goes away, so does our sense of identity. And that's true for everybody, but it's especially true. And I've learned this over the last, 18 years of working with players. When we're going through the draft process, what are the questions that they're asked? Do you love football? Are you passionate about football? Is this who you are? Like, are you dedicated? Is this 100%? Are you all in? And they have to show that their identity is football. Like, to even make it in the NFL, you have to convince the general manager that you are all in and that this is your focus. And aren't we all guilty of even talking about it if we see players getting like too into social media or too into other area of fashion or whatever? We're like, oh, they're not focused. And how bad is that? Because they're not just like, football isn't who they are.
They're complete human beings.
Yes, they are 100% like have a purpose in life that is much bigger than playing football. And so I took that observation into being an agent, and along with my own experience, and just thought, okay, if this was me, I obviously can't play football, but if this was my brother or my son or someone that I genuinely cared about, what would I want him to know about himself and his life and his future, even while going through the draft process, even while going into being the 1% of the 1% of football players in America that get to play at this level? Who else is he? And as an agent, not that I can control anything, but I think it's important that athletes are surrounded with people who see them not just for what they do and not just their worth, contract wise, but as a whole human being. And what is this man's calling in life? And how can I encourage that? How can I empower that? Not just, are you ready for the NFL? Am I going to get you the most money? Yes, all those things. Every agent does that. But how can I, taking it to the next level, how can I help him know his identity and his value and his worth beyond all of this? And keep him focused on what's important right now, which is playing football, but also, seeing himself as worth so much more and so much more valuable than what he does on the field. Does he love coaching? Does he love mentoring? Is he, does he get excited about business? Does he get excited about communications or writing, or what else is there inside of him? What else is there that he loves even about football? And even things that he loves about the game can reveal what his future is going to be about. And so we explore that from the very beginning. And I
amazing
that more and more agents do that. I think more agents are doing that. In fact, that it makes me happy that there are more women, because I feel like women are even, nothing against men. This is not a man-hating comment at all, but I think women are so nurturing by nature, and we want to draw out the best in people. And so, and we're so comprehensive. That's just how women tend to be wired. I'm wired that way. I want to know, like, but what do you love? Like, besides playing football, what do you love? What makes you get excited about life? And, what do you see yourself doing after football? And let's start laying the foundation now, so that when you reach that point, you're not just wandering around going, what's my purpose in life? Where's my value? But you can go, you know what? That was an amazing opportunity that most people only dream about and very few get to experience. And I can, with a smile on my face, I can say, I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And now I'm excited about what I'm doing next. And as an agent, if I can do that, then I'm successful. Then I've made an impact on these young men.
Kelli, that's incredible. And it's refreshing to hear that you're taking care of the complete person. I think
Yeah.
laying that foundation, or at least encouraging that type of mindset, really, and staying grounded in that way as you go through, because there's nothing grounding about the experience of getting drafted into the NFL.
No, no,
It's mayhem. Like,
it is.
and it's unreal. It's just, I feel like it's probably just the most bizarre feeling. Everything around you is just a circus,
Yeah.
and incredibly high pressure, high stakes. Everything's high stakes all the time. I think
Yeah.
by you nurturing or fostering that conversation about, the rest of that person, and reminding them that they are a whole person, they're not just, it probably feels like you're a widget in a machine when you're an NFL player, like, because you're so replaceable, and they always like
Yeah.
to remind you of that. And you have to perform constantly. If your wheel starts squeaking at all, you're gone. Like, and
Yeah.
it probably feels like you're part of a machine, and it probably robs them of their identity a little bit. So I love to hear that you're taking care of the whole person.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I try. I think
Yeah.
there's so much more that can be done.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Let's talk about Dalton's comment. So Dalton is the one that got very excited to find out about your Cherokee
Hi,
roots,
Dalton.
if you remember.
We'll see
Yes.
Yes. I saw, and I forget, is Dalton Navajo or what's, I don't even know what tribe that Dalton is with.
Dalton, you let us know in the comments. I believe
Tell us your
Navajo.
tribe. Yes.
But he did say, he made a comment about women in sports, and that being inspiring. I don't want to talk at length about it, because
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the conversation eventually is null and void. Nobody even thinks about it. But I would like to hear what your experience has been like, especially, you've done it long enough. I'm curious of how different it feels now
Yeah.
in what you do versus when you very first entered.
It's so different. And it's, it gave me such an appreciation. I remember when I first became an attorney, and even by the time I graduated law school, it was getting to where, law school was about 50% women, 50% men. I think it's still the same, or maybe even more women than men now attend law school. But the legal practice, at least in the state of Oklahoma, was still pretty male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting and talking to women who had been practicing for decades in Oklahoma, and they were the forerunners, and them sharing like the war stories of comments that would be made to them in court, and how they were treated by their male colleagues, and how hard that was to navigate. And it was really important to me to keep that perspective in mind, and always honor them for being the forerunners, and being willing to take the hits that I didn't have to take because they did. And so I maintain that perspective. And it's so funny thinking about it, because I became certified in 2005. There were a handful of women at the time. Kristen Kuliga was already an agent. And people that I looked up to, even in media, like Leslie Visser and even Amy Trask, who was such a forerunner and never makes a big deal out of being a woman in a man's world. I love that about her. She's so diplomatic, and she's just perfect. But I honor those women, because I know that they dealt with things that other women coming behind them will not have to. But when I became an agent, I didn't think about being one of the first women. I didn't think about it being unusual. I really didn't. I didn't think about being the first anything. And so I was a bit surprised when I say, oh, cool stuff from Dalton.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I was a bit surprised and caught off guard when I went to my first big NFL event as an agent, which was the Combine. And you'll have probably heard the story because I've talked about it in interviews. I've talked about it so much, it's kind of ridiculous. Like you, I kind of want it to be like a non-issue. Like, can we not talk about women doing this? And I'm like, well, of course women can do that. Like, why is it a big deal? Like,
right. For me, it's more about if it's changing. Like,
it is changing, and that's the beauty of it. I think at some point it will we'll still celebrate women doing awesome things, but it won't be so like, oh my gosh, a woman did that. Like, how is that possible? And so, but I remember going to to the first Combine, and I was in the agent meeting, and 900 men, and like me, and maybe like Kristen and Christina, and that was it, and Jill Baxter.
Wow.
And I walked out of the meeting, the big agent meeting that happens every year, kind of the State of the Union address with the NFL Players Association. I walked out of the meeting, and one of the like well-known agents was standing outside, and I had studied his contracts. I didn't know him, but I knew who he was, and he was representing the presumptive number one pick that year. And so he was talking to a bunch of reporters, and I walked past them, and he turned around and caught my eye, and he left the reporters, and he stepped over and he goes, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And I was like, an agent like you? And he's like, "Well, how many players do you have?" And I had one. I had one quarterback from Texas Tech. I said, "Well, I have one player." And he started laughing, and he said, "Well, honey, let me tell you why women are never going to make it in this business." And he proceeded to give me this huge lecture about, no one in there respects you. You're just a joke. You're going to figure it out that, women don't belong here. Players aren't going to with you for the right reasons. And like every possible sexist thing that could be said, he said. And I finally stopped him, and I was like, "Are you done with your lecture? Because you don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. You don't know why I'm here." I said, "I don't see a lot of other women around here, but that's going to change. And even if it doesn't, that doesn't mean I'm less capable. And that doesn't mean that women are less capable." And I said, "I'm sorry if you're intimidated, but you're just going to have to deal with it. Women are going to be here, and we're fully capable of doing an exceptional job as an agent." And so I walked away going what a jerk. Like the nerve, but also feeling like that was kind of a monumental, even though it was like an isolated conversation, it was sort of this monumental shift of someone's going to have to stand up and say, you need to change your mindset, and you need to get rid of any stigma you have in your head, because women are equipped and wired to do whatever it is that we are called to do. And when you start thinking about what an agent does, when I sit down and talk to a family, and this was like in the beginning, I spent a lot of time, like the first part of my meeting with every player and family was convincing them why I could do this as a woman. And no one has to do that anymore. I don't have to do that anymore, because women, we have a track record now. Like we represent players at the highest levels every year. And so it's not questioned, but it was in the beginning. I would literally get people saying to my face, "We think you're qualified, but we just can't imagine working with a woman."
Yes.
Yeah, I would.
Gosh, Kelli, I never even thought about that. But yeah, you're having to
fight for it. Yes.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I remember when it changed, at least for me, and I realized the tide was turning. I walked into a meeting with the player who ended up being my first rounder, and the first time that the NFLPA had known of a woman representing a first rounder. I think a woman had represented her brother years ago in the first round, but it was the first time a woman had actually signed a first rounder. He was the number 3 overall pick, and I went into the meeting with Gerald McCoy's family, and his dad looked at me. I launched into my, "I know I'm a woman, but I can handle this," defensive speech that I always started with, because that was the first question from everybody. They would be like, "Where's the real agent? Like, aren't you the assistant?" And so I went into, "Okay, I'm the agent. Like, here are my credentials. Here's what I can do. Here's my game plan. Here's how it's going to work, even though I'm a woman." And he stopped me. And Mr. McCoy was a very spiritual man. He was a very quoted the Bible constantly. I just adored him. He had the biggest smile, would light up the room. And he stopped me and said, "Kelli, you need to realize right now that you first of all, you need to stop being defensive about being a woman, and you need to realize that you are Deborah." And I was like, "Okay, Deborah, who's Deborah? Who's Deborah?" And I was trying to remember back to Bible school. And so I went and looked it up, and Deborah in the Bible was a judge. She was in a time when women were never held places of authority. She was called and ascended to being one of the top officials in the Jewish nation in Israel. And she was a judge. She led wars. She led victories in wars. And it was unheard of that a woman would ascend to that position. And so he was saying, you're called to be here. It doesn't matter that you're a woman, and you need to quit making excuses or being defensive about it. You just need to step into your authority. And that's when everything changed for me. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm done defending, like talking about being a woman in a man's world. I'm just done. I'm gonna just go do my job and
Yeah.
and do great work. And other
Yeah.
women will
Yes.
never have to face what I face. So,
I absolutely love that story. And also, it shifts it to being a them problem, not a you problem. If you
Mm,
don't bring it up first, then it forces them, if they have a problem, they have to bring
that's
it
on
up.
them. Yeah, that's on them. And I think
Yeah.
now we're at a point, and here's what I'm okay with. Like I wrestled with it for a long time, but I'm okay with this. So um, no longer am I counted out because I'm a woman. There may be a player that is like, you know what, there are all different types of personalities in the agent world. And there are some players that want to sign with a certain agent because they just click with that agent and they feel comfortable and they
Mhm.
trust him or her, and that's who fits them. And if I'm not a fit for a player, if a player is like, I respect you, but I just feel way more comfortable with this person, I'm good with that. I'm okay with
Right.
that. Like if
Mhm.
I connect with a player, we both know. Like we're both like, yeah, we're supposed to work together. Like this is a great, partnership.
Right.
But if it doesn't click, I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to say, oh, it's because you're anti-woman. No, women
Yeah.
women are here and women are having success, and there's no longer that barrier. We're never going to be just counted out because of gender. It's
Right.
just going to be, does a player feel comfortable? And if you
Right.
ask all of my players, most of them are going to be like, I didn't care if she was a woman or a man. I just thought she was the best.
Right.
Felt I just felt the most comfortable. I will have some players that say I can't imagine signing with a guy, which is kind of funny too. They're like,
Yeah.
like Kelly's like Mama Bear. I know she's going to go fight for me. I know she's going to care about me and send me cookies and do all the things that just make me me, and it works. And so
Yeah.
I think at least in the agent world, we've arrived at that place where
Right.
women can be treated respectfully and equally.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Bridget, did you have something that you wanted to ask?
well, we can figure out how to sequence it, but Kelli, one of the things I most love about the way you approach kind of all 27 of your jobs, really. Yeah, I'm like, oh man, I need to turn up the dial. But one of the things I thought was really special, and there is a part of me who always thinks, as a female leader, anytime we're underrepresented in a space,
Yeah.
we've all heard the term, you have to be twice as good to get half the credit. But what I love about the way you approach this is that, there are innumerable successes you've had, but you celebrate the fail. I call them the fail forwards. I get that from the nonprofit I work at. And I love the idea of celebrating that things don't always go right. And
Yeah.
instead of wallowing in it or letting that define us, you learn from it and move on. So I really want to get to Eric's question, but I was wondering, just in the spirit of this like whole personhood, and you're a badass regardless of gender or any other demographic category. I'm wondering if you can tell us, like, what's been your biggest fail forward and what did you take away from it?
Oh my gosh, there have been so many. And I don't know if I can even pick one. There have been so many times when I like trusted the wrong people, or um, I think took bad advice. We've all been through those things.
Mm.
Um, I think there have been times. There were definitely times when I maybe spent too much time trying to like prove my worth by doing something, by like going above and beyond. And I can think of one specific example. It was a big time player that I represented, and I felt like I had to do everything for him, for his family. And I was there for everything. I was not just the agent and the lawyer, which I am for all my players, but I was planning the wedding, and I was picking up the dry cleaning, and I was like doing all the things, booking every flight. And this was early on. And I thought I was proving my worth by
Mm,
doing everything. And then when it came down to it, he actually ended up like moving to a different, like firing me and moving to a different agent. And I was like, what did I do wrong? And he goes, nothing, but and this had been put in his head. He said, real agents just do contracts. And you were more like a family friend to us. And I can hire a personal assistant to do all of that stuff. And I was like, what? like wait a minute.
Right.
But I also did your $63 million contract. Like, what are you talking about? And so but I realized looking back at the time, it was one of those things. Getting fired is never fun. Especially when you're told you didn't do anything wrong. I just was convinced to go in this different direction. And there was nothing I could do about it. There was no level of convincing that I could do to change it. And at the time, I just wanted to say, there's no lesson in this. It just sucks. I'm supposed to learn anything from this. This is just wrong. But I did learn so much. And I learned that sometimes you can devalue yourself by doing too much that's not being appreciated. That was a tough lesson. Also learning that you can't be all things to all people. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, like all the cliches. But looking back, I thought, there were definitely ways I could have proven my value that didn't involve me lowering my boundaries, basically,
Yeah.
or not demanding some level of respect. That here's what I do for you, and I can help you connect with people who can help you with these other areas, but I'm not going to just be at your beck and call and do everything for you.
I mean, what a blessing, Kelli. If he hadn't, I mean, he was a blessing. That moment was a blessing and probably a turning point going forward. Because how worn out would you be right now if you were expected to behave that way with everybody?
Seriously. And the other telling thing, and I still and we now have a great relationship. Now he's come back around. We're great friends now, and we talk about how much we both learned. And I adore him and his family, and I always will. They'll always be a special part of my life. But even while I was working for him and I was trying to even recruit other clients, he didn't want to share me. Like, he and his family were like, no, but you're doing everything for us. You can't have other clients. That'll take away from what we're doing. I'm like, but wait, I can't just be an agent with, one or two players. I can't, at some point you're going to retire. What am I going to do then? And so I learned that I really learned boundaries. I learned how to truly do my job, but to still maintain, I don't know, just helping, especially helping athletes who it's so much is thrown at them, at such a young age, so much responsibility. And I realized my responsibility isn't to do everything for them. It is to be their advocate and to do the things that are needed to be done, but also help them grow to become great businessmen and great professionals. And if I don't do that, then I'm going to wear myself out, and they're not going to learn anything either about how to.
Well, there's that. And then also think you should be just doing the things that are irreplaceable. You have skill sets that other people can't do for them. As far as all the errands and stuff, other people can do that. The irreplaceable stuff only you can do. And the more of the other stuff that you are doing is less clients that you could be helping with the irreplaceable stuff. So you're really doing other people a disservice that could have really used you and your talent and what you can do for them. But I want to get through a few questions that we have in the chat, and then also get to a couple points, because you had a really great story that I wanted to hear in its entirety when we were talking before we came online, and that I want everybody else to hear too. But I believe Eric brought up something about, for a lot of fans, our frame of reference is like a Jerry Maguire movie. And so I don't know that people really, I know I don't understand what an agent actually does. Like, what's a day in the life? I know it's different probably depending on what time in the season you're in. But what do you do throughout the day?
Question. And just so you know, when I became an agent, that was my only frame of reference too. I didn't know. I'd seen the movie, and I was like, I'm not like that, I don't think. And I don't know if I can be like that. But yeah, so the funny thing about the Jerry Maguire movie is there are so many things in it that are actually really true to life. Like I can't even watch the movie because too much of it hits close to home.
That shocks me. I'm honestly shook right now because I thought you would have been like, that's the most ridiculous movie that's ever been made.
Well, there are parts of it that are certainly ridiculous. And the same with
Right.
Day, as we all know. Because it's sensationalized for TV or film, but there are so many things that I'm like, oh gosh, that's like, I feel this in my soul when I watch it. So I can't even watch it anymore. But yeah, it depends on, for an agent, it depends on the time of season. I'm always recruiting. I'm always developing relationships with whether it's scouts or families or coaches. So I'm constantly in recruiting mode. I have a much more sophisticated recruiting system now than when I started. At the beginning, it was just literally like jump in the car and drive 8 hours and wait outside a locker room to see if I could, talk to a player when he was leaving after a game. So there's the recruiting aspect, which is very, very time consuming. So I'm always doing that.
Is that what you're doing right now?
Yes, I am doing.
Yeah.
I'm on a recruiting trip right now in Florida. So, yeah, constant travel for that. And then my current athletes in the league, obviously I represent them through the draft. I set up their training. I'm present for the training, for the All-Star games, for the combine, for pro day. So draft is a really intense time with rookies. And then, of course, negotiate their contracts. But then even with players that I have in the league, it's talking to them, at least once, usually multiple times a week, just seeing how things are going, dealing with injuries. I feel like this year, for whatever reason, injuries have just been rampant.
Haven't they?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I've been spending more time on the phone with doctors and workers' comp attorneys than I am with coaches or general managers. It's really, really frustrating. But injuries are part of football. That's just, it's 100% injury rate. It's just a matter of how bad and when. And so I'm dealing with, whether it's injury settlements or setting up surgery or rehab or getting second opinions, working with workers' comp. Dealing with fines or grievances, going through the arbitration process if we have to, dealing with players that are moving into retirement and making sure they have all of their benefits lined up, that they're applying for everything that they're due. And so it's whatever stage of life a player is in, I'm part of that. So it's not just getting the contract done. It's everything that happens throughout the season. Everything that happens during the off season, everything that happens post retirement. A lot of people didn't think about this, and I honestly, as a fan, had not thought about it. When I have a player that goes down with an injury on a Sunday, I'm typically, by the time he gets escorted or carted off the field, I've been on the phone with his wife or his girlfriend or his mom. I've already texted the head trainer. I've already texted usually the doctor.
Wow.
I have the player call me when he gets back to the locker room if he's getting an x-ray. And so while the game is still going on, we're already launching into what do we do next? If it's season ending, if it's potentially career ending, we're dealing with all the ramifications before the game is over. And most people don't realize that. I probably go in person to about 30 games a year. But
I was just going to ask you, what is a Sunday game day like for you? I mean, well, there's more than Sunday, but you know what I mean? What's a game day like for
Game
you?
days, I'm usually at least one game, either a Thursday, Sunday, or Monday, sometimes a couple games a week. And then I'm monitoring on my phone all the other games, or if I'm in a suite where I can watch, other games, or if I'm in an area where you can see other games, I'm constantly checking in on all my other guys, trying to watch the player that I'm there to see. If I'm, I try to see if I have a visiting player, I'll see him the day before or the morning before. I'll see my player that's there playing. If it's a home game for him, I'll see him afterwards, usually take him and his family to dinner, talk through life, talk through whatever else we need to talk through. I'll be meeting with team personnel the next day, or on the sidelines before the game. And so games are fun, but I'm not just going to drink a beer and eat a hot dog.
I imagine they're intense days.
They're long, intense days. And, going to a game is kind of draining. You feel like you played the game because you've just gone through the whole day of getting to the game and dealing with everyone you're supposed to deal with. And keeping an eye on everything, plus communicating with all my other players. And so Sundays, fall is just an intense time, but I love it. I love my players. I am praying for them and encouraging them constantly. I'm doing the work for them constantly. I do their legal work. A lot of them, I manage their brand and their off the field interests as well, and make sure that they have a good team around them. And it's very, very comprehensive, but it definitely appeals to my, like, I feel like, not broad brushing, all women are like this, but I think as women, we love to be like taking care of everybody and taking care of everything. And we're capable of, juggling 10 balls in the air at the same time and doing it with grace. And so for every person who told me when I first became an agent that it was a terrible idea because women shouldn't be agents, I just want to say, like, Exhibit A,
right?
women are amazing agents. We do it all. And we do it all with grace and with
We've
love.
been taking care of people and keeping multiple people alive for
Yes,
the dawn of time.
I think women are just excellent dot connectors, right? We have this ability to go up on the balcony, survey, like, okay, this is what needs tending to, this is what needs tending to, and then go down on the dance floor and say, okay, here's how it's getting done, or here's how we mobilize people to get things done. In the case of your fail forward, like, right, we don't have to do everything. But I think we have this real ability to go up a lot of different altitudes to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. I have so much fun. I have great relationships with my players' moms and their significant others, and we always joke about the fact that women get things done. Like, if there's an issue going on with a player, if his mom and I or his wife and I are connected, we're gonna get it taken care of. Whatever the issue is, we're gonna get it done. And I love that. And so I think it runs counter to any narrative that women are somehow incapable of doing a job just because it relates to a male dominated sport. It's
right.
Really,
I'm curious, when it comes to agents, I would tend to think that that's not necessarily the friendliest group of cohorts. Like, it almost feels, are you guys like almost see each other as like, I don't want to say enemies. What am I saying? I don't know, like, you're almost in contention with each other. Like, is that like like, do you guys have camaraderie, or is it really just like everybody?
There's definitely a level of camaraderie. It's the agent world, unfortunately, it's not just competitive. I'm so used to, like, my whole entire life I've been competitive. And I had, some of my biggest competitors in baton twirling were also some of my dearest friends. And we would, fight like heck to compete against each other on the floor, and then we'd go have fun together. And the agent world is competitive, but it's also, there's some level of just some underbelly, some corruption that makes it hard. And it creates, I think, issues that are not necessarily present if it was just going to be a competitive, like, best man wins type of world. It's just there's a different dynamic in the sports world, in the sports agent world. But
so much competition. Yeah,
it really is. But that being said, I have some tremendous relationships with agents that I respect and admire, and will call and discuss issues that are happening that impact all of us, or impact, all of us representing players with a certain team. I remember however many years ago, and it's about to happen again, when Buffalo was about to get like 8 feet of snow before a game. And it's about to happen this weekend. I guess they already moved the game to Detroit, but this happened probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I had a Buffalo Bills player, and our players they moved the game from Buffalo to New York. And so the athletes just had to get to the facility to get on a bus to go get to New York, to New York City. But a lot of our players were snowed in. And I called my player who had played for USC. He was from Florida. He had never seen snow in his life. And I was like, just go shovel your driveway. And he's like, Kelli, it's 8 feet. Like, how do I get out? And I had to call other agents and the NFLPA, and we had to, like, arrange for snowmobiles to get our players to the facility. And so there are times when, as agents, you have to come together and work, for the collective good. And even through the whole CBA process, there are definitely some friendships that I treasure a few that are very dear to me, but overall, it's a pretty tough world.
Yeah. This is my mom, by the way, and she just wants to know if that jerk, the man that had said what he said to you when you very first entered, if you ever crossed
Yeah.
paths again and if his
Oh yeah,
attitude ever changed.
yeah, we did. In fact, we ended up becoming sort of friends, like friends in the agent world.
Hmm.
Where he would call and get my perspective on something that was happening contractually with players or market wise in the industry, and so we would have professional conversations, and we actually ended up co-representing a player, if you can believe that, like years ago.
That is mind blowing.
I
Yeah,
love
I
the full
love it.
circle
it
moments.
was a full
Yes.
circle moment when I'm like, he never apologized, but that was enough for me. When he's like,
Yeah.
"Let's do this together," I'm like,
Enough said.
okay.
Yeah. I was curious, a question I definitely wanted to know. So beyond like like your moment with that guy and like whatever,
Yeah.
I know that players get asked a lot about what their welcome to the NFL moment was. And I'm
Yeah.
curious if you had one. I mean, when I'm talking like from the business standpoint, when you
Yeah.
maybe started negotiating contracts or started getting into the business, did you have what you felt was a welcome to the NFL moment?
Ooh. Um, there were a lot of moments early on when I would go in to meet with a player and I would feel really, really great about the presentation. At the end, he would just say, "Well, do you have a man that works with you?" Or like there would be these moments. And a lot of that was just based on, again, people just players weren't used to working with women in football. And that's changed.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know about a welcome to the NFL moment. There have definitely been moments when, um, like I stood, and it really is just when you believe in a player so much and you stand and you pound the table for a kid and then you see him get an opportunity. There have been so many of those. There was a moment when I was negotiating a contract for Blake Darwin. It's probably one of my favorite negotiations ever, and still a contract that, much like, well, not like, there are contracts that other agents will try to use as a comparable in their negotiation, and some contracts are just considered anomalies, like Deshaun Watson. And I had one tight end, not on the Deshaun Watson level. Our contract was, 23 million for a player that had never started, had come off a practice squad, had a couple years experience. Um, and I was able to, when I first went to the team with my offer, they, basically laughed. They're like, "That's ridiculous. Like, we'll pay him a fourth of that." And we ended up getting everything. Actually, I demanded higher than what I thought we could get, and we ended up getting what we demanded.
Wow.
Wow.
And it was a fight, but I stood up to, some of the toughest ownership and leadership in the NFL when they were trying to laugh me out of the room and say, "You're being ridiculous. You're demanding way too much." I'm like, "No, this is what, like, look at the numbers, look at the comparables, look at the market. This is what he demands." And we stood our ground and we got it. And that
Amazing.
was a moment that I'll never forget. Not only because it was like a professional victory for me that we really, really, I stood up to someone that was trying to totally dismiss what I was trying to say because I was prepared and because I was willing to fight for it. But also calling the player, and it was so special because he was a minimum salary guy who was
Yeah.
like $1 million signing bonus. And when I called and gave him the final numbers, he'd been engaged the whole process, but I called and gave him the final amounts. And the other end of the line was totally silent. And I was like, "What? Like, are you okay? Like, are you happy?" And he's like, "Yeah, but he's like, I feel like we've been talking about sort of in this abstract about these numbers, like it's monopoly money. And it just suddenly hit me that this is real. Like
Yeah.
I'm really getting paid $23 million. Like
Yeah.
how is that even possible? Like, is this real life?" And it hit him all at once and he just lost it. And I was like, this is just, I love this. I love that
Yeah.
it's not just about the money. Yes, the money was amazing, but it totally, totally radically changed his life.
Yeah.
Um, and it didn't have to be, hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of dollars. It was just a
Yeah.
really, really special moment. So
Makes it all worth it because you have really tireless days where I'm sure you don't sleep much.
yeah,
So that makes it worth it.
yeah,
It makes me think about And I do want to I don't want to keep you too much longer because you've been so generous with your time. I do want to try to get a couple quick things in. As far as Dalton's question about mental health, have you seen a lot of change in the conversation about having resources for
Yeah,
that and having more conversation openly among the NFL on that?
absolutely. And it's funny. I feel like such an old timer now. Like when I became an agent, there was no Twitter. There were, things just
Mm.
There
existed.
may not be one anymore soon either. We're not
Right.
sure.
That's where, I know how to exist without Twitter. I'm good. But so much has changed in so many ways. Not necessarily for the better, but I think one of the great things that I've seen is I remember representing athletes early on, and they were so uncomfortable with sharing if they were dealing with something mentally. They felt like, and it's kind of drilled into, it has over the years, it was drilled into them. Like even in college, if you're hurt, don't tell anybody, just play through the pain, you'll lose your job. And then when you get to the NFL, I have to kind of sort of retrain them about, no, you have to communicate when you're hurt. Like that's
Yeah.
part of, this is your job now. This is, I know what you're thinking, but we have to be strategic, and we have to be, this is your job. And so you have to communicate when you're dealing with something. And now players are, the difference is night and day with players saying, hey, I'm really struggling. Can you help me find a therapist? Can you help me, find some resources? This is what I'm dealing with. And so, yeah, I'm so thankful that the conversation is now open where, and it's not weakness. And I think that was the thing that players needed to realize is just because you're wrestling with something on the mental side or the psychological or spiritual side, that doesn't mean you're weak. And holding that in doesn't make you any stronger. Actually being authentic and being, even expressing, I don't know if vulnerability is the right word, but it is. It's saying, hey, this is something that I'm struggling with. I need resources. I need help with this.
Right.
And now players can acknowledge, okay, if they're wrestling, if their hamstring is tight, they know they need to go talk to someone and get it worked on. And they also know that, hey, I'm wrestling with this crippling level of anxiety or depression, or I'm dealing with something impacting me mentally, and now it's bleeding over into my physical game. This has to be addressed. And so, yeah,
Right.
I think the resources are way better than they were in the past. And I think there are professionals that are rising up to meet those needs. And I would hope, and that was always my thing when I became an agent. It wasn't just about being a pioneer for women, but I wanted to be a pioneer for agents who cared about the whole person and wanted to do things
Right.
the right way, as if it was people that, our brother, our son, or, someone that we care about as a person, not just as a client, but as a person. And I think that's really where I wanted to be a pioneer, is let's see these guys as people that are human beings who need care for the whole person. And we're seeing more and more of that.
Right. I mean, to Bridget's point earlier about life after football, you see these guys, like, their body has taken such a toll over the years, and they can't hardly walk, and and their backs are killing them. And you hope that the mental health is addressed along the way, so that they're not also dealing with sustained injuries from that. That's a real factor. And at least that's one that you can tend to as you go. You might not always be able to get away with sore knees years after you stop playing, but if you take care of your brain and that is something that you don't have to suffer through afterwards.
I think one of the other issues that we're hopefully going to see more advancement in is pain management and treatment of pain, because that's another huge issue when players are in the league, they have access to anything that they need to address pain. And we try to take care of retired players, and I think we're doing a better job. But are there alternatives to the medications that we're prescribing? Are there treatments that are more holistic and healthier? So I think that's another area that I really, really want to see advancement in.
Yeah, there's room to grow for sure. Before we let you go, I think that's a good segue into, you talk a lot about the whole person. And And about it being more than just getting a good contract in the NFL. There's just so much more to it. And you were telling us a story before we logged in and went live that I found so touching about how much bigger what you do as a whole, as a professional career beyond football. So can you tell us a little bit about that story? Because it's just beautiful.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, it opened up, as do most opportunities now that I experience, come through what I do in football. So I'm so grateful for that, the doors that sports can open to make an impact that's so much bigger on the world. Several years ago, I got a call about a man who had been incarcerated, wrongfully convicted of murder, and had served on death row for more than 20 years and was awaiting his execution. And I was contacted because of being an NFL agent in the state of Oklahoma. He was in Oklahoma, and he was incarcerated at McAllister at Big Mac, which is death row in Oklahoma. And his case had picked up some attention nationwide. It was featured by I think ABC News did a feature on it called "The Last Defense." He was part of that. Viola Davis produced it.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'll be honest, I had never seen the documentary.
I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, it's called The Last Defense. And so when I was contacted, I was unfamiliar with the case. I was unfamiliar with his story, but I was asked, could you write a letter on his behalf to the governor? Because now his appeals have all run. Now the Pardon and Parole Board gets to potentially consider his case, and the governor gets to decide whether to commute his sentence and grant clemency. And they said, can maybe some of your players write letters also? And I said, I honestly don't know enough about the case. I'd love to read more about it. And so they sent me some talking points, and I said, okay, I'm a lawyer, and I'm not a criminal defense lawyer. I worked for the Court of Criminal Appeals during law school, so I had enough familiarity to know that convictions were rarely overturned in the state of Oklahoma, and then we do execute quite a few. We've had a long history of execution. And so I knew it was probably going to be impossible to overturn it. And I said, I just don't know, but can I read the file? And so they sent me his file. I read the entire file, everything, the entire transcript. And when I got to the end of the transcript of the trial, the prosecution had presented their case against him. His defense attorneys, who had not questioned anything, had not really cross-examined any of the witnesses. I was all the way through reading the transcript. I was like, where are his attorneys? And when it came time for his defense, his attorney stood up and said, the defense rests. That's it.
Wow.
No witnesses. No, he had an alibi. No evidence was presented. There was exonerating evidence that was never presented. Since the trial and since his appeals ran, another man who was convicted as a co-conspirator ended up confessing to the murder to multiple people who came forward.
How could this possibly be beyond a reasonable doubt?
I know.
There's lots of doubt.
No, there's tons of doubt. The problem was it was never presented to the jury. And even through the appellate process, the appeals court, multiple appellate judges looked at the same transcript and never really got to consider the exonerating evidence. And so as I read the transcript, I was like, oh my gosh, like not only is there a question about this man's guilt, I think he's innocent. And so I asked to speak to his attorney, his newly appointed attorney. And I said, I just have one question before I, jump into this thing, because I'm going to do more than just write a letter. Can I meet him? And he said, well, we've never really had anyone ask that. And I said, well, why not? Like, I'm an attorney. I can go meet him, right? And so I went to death row, and I spent several hours sitting and talking to him about life. And I was so blown away by his perspective and his wisdom, and even the lack of bitterness that he had. And the amazing thing that he said, and when he said this, I was like, I'm bringing back any of my players that will come with me to meet you. He said, I don't belong here for the crime that I was convicted of, but I'm here because of choices that I made as a young man. As a teenager, I didn't embrace the opportunities that my parents afforded me. I didn't embrace the opportunities that education afforded me. He said I could have been anything in this country, and instead I surrounded myself with people that I wanted to prove I was a cool guy. He said it a little bit differently, but essentially he went to an inner city school. He was super smart. He had an academic leadership scholarship to the University of Oklahoma, but he wanted to fit in. And the guys that he was trying to fit in with, who he was taking their ACT tests for them, and he was doing some things that were not good. He wasn't, he wasn't carjacking, but when the guys carjacked and ended up killing a man in the process of stealing his car, they planted the evidence and pinned it on him, on Julius. And so he said, my decisions with who I surrounded myself with, and that I didn't take advantage of the opportunities, that's what led me here. And he said, because of that, I want to share that with other young men, because I want them to realize that it's not that this country is against them. They have opportunities to become something in this country, and they may have to fight for it, but it's the decisions that they make that will determine their outcome. And I went, okay, like the world needs to hear this. And
Powerful.
So I took one of my athletes back to meet him, changed his life. Really, I watched a convicted felon on death row pour hope and wisdom and encouragement into a wide receiver in the NFL. And I thought, and I wasn't allowed to take anything in. The place that we would meet him in death row was horrible. It was the cell right under the death chamber.
Oh my
dark.
God, Kelli.
He had not even been outside to see the sun in 22 years. Had not been outside. Had not hugged his mom. And I just couldn't imagine. What blew me away was how much light and hope he had in him, even having been in a cage for 22 years, wrongfully. And so at that second meeting, he asked if I would be his advocate during the parole process, the pardon and parole process. And I said, I'm not a criminal lawyer. And he goes, no, but you understand. I want you to be my voice. And so I fought for him. I argued his case before the Pardon and Parole Board. The Pardon and Parole Board granted clemency, life with a possibility of parole. We had to go through another hearing on commutation once his execution date was set by the court. And then the governor still had to make a decision. He could reject the Pardon and Parole Board, or he could agree to commute and save his life. And it was 1 year ago tonight that we were waiting for the call. Julius was set to be executed on November 18th last year at 4:00 in the afternoon. And I spoke to him for the very last time, I thought, a year ago tonight. And we said goodbye. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
We said goodbye. I told him I'd see him in heaven. And I told him I was so proud to know him. Yeah. And I told him I would make sure that his message was heard. And he gave me instructions on setting up a nonprofit and how to carry out his legacy and how to encourage young men through his life. And those were our last, that was our last conversation. We said goodbye. And then at noon on the 18th, the governor's office called and said, we're agreeing to commute his sentence. And so he's alive. He's still alive, and we're still fighting. He's still in prison, but he has hope because he's alive. Yeah. And the amazing thing, and there were so many people that fought for him and prayed for him and advocated for him. I just happened to be, to have an unbelievable opportunity. Again, just because I chose to pursue, what's my purpose in life? And it led me to working with nonprofits, which led me to working with athletes, which led me to get a phone call to advocate for a man who was on death row. And all of those things, I could not have planned that on my own. I couldn't have mapped that out. But whatever you want to call it, divine providence, whatever, I had the unbelievable opportunity to be in a place to fight for someone's life and to be an advocate for justice. And that is something I will never, ever forget. It's probably the most important thing that I'll ever do in my life. And I'm so grateful. And I'm so grateful that he's still alive. We still have a ways to go. We're going to keep fighting for his release. I cannot wait to have him over for dinner.
Yes.
And we talk about it all the time, and what he aspires to accomplish. He so wants to stand for hope and unity. He went into prison in 1999. He has no concept of social media. He has no concept of the world the way it is now. And he's such a light of hope and unity and saying, you know what, why don't we all just get together and figure this out together? Let's just all work together. And I'm like, can I just model that and give it to everybody? Right. Because we need more of that. We need more love and hope in the world. And it came to me through a man on death row. And so it's, by far the most amazing experience of my life.
Well, bless you and bless Julius for one of the most powerful messages I've heard in a while. And that is something that I know I'll carry with me for a while. It's just amazing where you can find the source of so much hope sometimes in the most unlikely places. Is he at least off death row? Did they change where they have him?
Yeah, it's so amazing now. When the next time I saw him, I was used to when we would go, it would be an hours long process of going through security, and I would go and sit in this little broom closet sized room at a table, and he would come in chained and fully chained, leg irons, handcuffs, just restrained and not really treated like a human being. And the next time I saw him, I walked into the visiting area, which was like a big cafeteria, and he comes just bouncing in like a normal person, walking on cloud nine, and the sun was shining and there were windows, and I gave him a big hug, and he wasn't wearing any leg irons, he wasn't chained, and we just got to sit and have a cup of coffee, like normal people, and talk about life. I'm now doing work for him. I did help him start his nonprofit, and
oh my goodness,
that's incredible.
So I'm so excited about the future for him.
If there's any chance later, if you would like to share the nonprofit with me, that's something I would love to put out there.
I will.
Because talk about overwhelming odds to do good and to give back. Like, who's he giving back to? The world did him wrong.
Exactly.
And he could be an amazing person. Yeah.
He could be so of all people, he could say, this world is against me. This system is rigged. I'll never overcome. And he has, and he is. And even behind bars, he's accomplishing so much more than many people that I know. So it's pretty inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah. Very inspiring. What perspective.
That is so beautiful. I mean, didn't expect to get misty.
I know.
At 9:24 on a Thursday night, but I mean, I can't think of a more beautiful message that brings the humanity back to all of us. And I think sometimes we think about a sport as something very technical, as something that's we're both part of, but also not part of. Yeah. And I love that this is all of the threads of the tapestry that weave us together. So I think that is the most beautiful parting message you could have shared with us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this conversation, and grateful for you guys and all that you're doing. Keep doing it. And it comes down to it. It's about people. Sports, everything we do is about people. And it's, do you value other people? Do you love well? Then that's what matters. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Kelli. Thanks so much. I will tell you now, if I had a child and he was going into the NFL, I would want you to represent him, because I know you would treat him right.
Thank you.
I would want Mama Bear on his side.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for the chance.
It was such a pleasure, Kelli. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody in the chat for joining us, and to everybody that watches later. I really appreciate it. Hope you had as much enjoyment out of it as we all did. But good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.